right, let's start. So, good evening. Welcome to MSD at Home with Dot.Ay in conjunction with A Visiting School Melbourne. My name is Paul Lowe. I'm a senior lecturer in digital architecture design here at the Melbourne School of Design, University of Melbourne. I begin this evening's proceeding by acknowledging the traditional owner of the land on which this event took place here in Melbourne, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. And to the traditional owner of the land, wherever you are, I pay my respect to the elders, families past and present. So this is the third public event of the A Visiting School Melbourne lecture series. And tonight, I'll be co-hosting with Mon Q, the director of A Visiting School, and I'll invite Mon to introduce our speaker in a bit more detail later. So the Melbourne School of Design has hosted the Architecture Association Visiting School for the last 5 years. Each year, we invite a group of A tutors, past and present, alumni, and talented designers that is affiliated with the school to teach a 2-week design workshop here at the Melbourne School of Design. The visiting school provides an experimental platforms in which staff and students can test immersion, design methods, technology, techniques, and this year we also extend this experimental mentality towards a different way of teaching online. So in the last 2 lectures, the first by Tiger on how to fail properly, we discussed the needs for a more humanist user interface to technology. Yesterday, we had a conversation with Nathan Su, an alumnus of MSD, currently based in LA, on the role of mixed reality and perception in contemporary digital culture. So if the last 2 events probes and framed the consumption of future technology, privileging the visual and the gestural, then tonight's event is a feast for the year. We're delighted to welcome Alex Yabsley, aka Dot.Ay, a DJ based in Melbourne. The MSD at Home series so far are interviews of prominent thinkers and practitioners in the living room. So tonight we'll turn this living room into a dance floor with a live performance from Alex. So the role of digital music is rarely discussed in architectural design school, as it's already although it's already part of the daily consumptions. Designers' approach to music is often about freezing it in a formal sense, in a banal way, and as a metaphor for design, as opposed to going deep into understanding the techniques and the methodology of contemporary digital soundscape, exploring ideas of loops, transitions, and sampling.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Ah, beautiful. I'm so sorry. The computer just decided to glitch out. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Alex, aka Dot.Ay. He has been making music on the retro console Gameboys for about a decade now. He's a highly experimental artist with a keen oral aesthetic of chiptunes, a musical genre which involves repurposing video game hardwares for creating music. His sound juxtaposes hard, fast noise with cute cut melodies, whilst maintaining a very high energy vibe. Triple J described it as, it's like a photon-powered mech warrior with Pokemon tattoos. So when you're listening to this, maybe try and imagine that in your head. Dot.Ay has performed all around the world, including New York, Tokyo, Milan, and recently apparently at a small bar in Finland whilst in COVID-19 lockdown. So in light of keeping the speaker series as a festival, we're going to jazz it up a bit and treat this set as a music festival. I know many of you might be in lockdown, and today is the first time of lockdown for the next 6 weeks. So feel free to put on some headphones, clear some space in your room, stand up, dance it out, and just enjoy the electronic indie music. We'll be live streaming this from Twitch, and we'll have some questions at the end. So bear with us right now to get this logistical inception of streaming from Zoom into Twitch. So let's get that going, shall we, Alex?
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great.
Sorry, Alex, you want to talk a little bit before that? Yeah,
yeah, sure. Here I am. Hey, everyone. So just, really briefly, I think one of the main things that is sometimes difficult to understand with my music or my sounds is where exactly it's coming from. So I have 2 Nintendo Game Boys, and that's essentially all that you're going to be getting. The sounds that you hear are all coming from these 2 guys, 1 and 2. And all the video is actually coming from older video hardware. So I've got a VHS and an old analog video mixer that's providing some of the visual things. So as soon as I press this button, I'm going to stop talking here, but you'll be able to hear me on the screen share. There might just be a small lag between both, but let's give it a shot.
Alright, he's back on.
Alright, sorry everybody. Zoom had a real big issue there. But we've come good. And now we're here. I'm here. And we're gonna have some fun on the internet. Audio.
Alex has just dropped out at the moment. Just give us a second, bear with us. We'll get in touch, make sure that he's back audioly. Alright, sounds like we're back on. Enjoy.
heat and distance. Hello, thank you, thanks so much. I'm going to be jumping back in the Zoom now, which means this Twitch is about to finish. Thanks again. See you later.
Thank you, Alex. We'll wait for a second for Alex to come back to the Zoom channel with us.
And I'm back.
Well done, Alex. That's amazing.
Hopefully.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Sounds amazing. Mon will be joining us in a second. I think he's just jumping back onto the channel. Mon, are you here with us? I think he's still coming back.
Yeah, I'm just having to make sure that everything is unshared and unscreened. So yes.
Yes. All right. I'm back as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah,
I can.
We can. Okay.
I had a ringing in my ear for a second, but that was just my own feedback at this end. Sorry about the mix-up. It seems that as soon as I was running this Zoom webinar, it just wasn't allowing me to send audio through to Twitch. So something was blocking it, so I just had to jump out. But I think it worked, right?
Yeah, it does, and it sounds really good. I put on my big headphone just so that I can hear it properly.
Yeah, cool. That was...
No, it's amazing. It's we got plenty of really nice comments on the Q&A, saying how amazing this the sound is and how unique the sound is. I think you might even have a music producer in New York City that's after you. Hasn't left any detail yet, so perhaps you want to get in touch with him directly. So Alex, well, as we calm down now, so let's deep into your music. I have a first question.
It seems very strange.
Yes.
Yeah, go.
It's great because it's probably one of the first lectures that I've been to. There's no talk, but actually just music, and I think it speaks for itself. I think that's super cool. What's the inspiration behind the Game Boy?
So for me, it came from. It's not like it was a element of nostalgia or anything like that. Like I didn't have a Game Boy as a kid. I had a Sega Master System, was probably about it, but it's definitely like, it's not like video games were a huge part of my life. It was mainly once I was studying audio in university, I was making some very kind of high concept sound art. So very academic and very at this kind of serious music, serious music and sound that was very conceptual. And then in that sphere, when my head was in that space, I actually came across on YouTube some people making music on Game Boys, and it seemed so far from the kind of high concept pure sound that I was dealing with on a serious level. So I started doing it for fun as a kind of release, because there's nothing serious. I mean, it's hard to approach it seriously, but at the same time, once I started doing it, there's a depth that I wasn't aware of before. And I actually ended up then further on in my university studies, ended up shifting my focus of studies to the Game Boy and its sonic characteristics and things like that. So yeah, for me, it's definitely, it was about the sound, and I guess about the playfulness of the sound.
You know, talking about sound and talking about these sort of new sounds that sort of emerging from this digital world. Like we as sort of architects and digital architects, we're creating worlds online.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, you know, is inherently missing is sometimes sound, right? Like when we design a piece of architecture, sound is somehow inherent because we live in this sort of, you know, gravitational world that already has its own rule set. So when we're sort of designing, I guess the question for me would be, you know, how, or do you ever see your sound be attached to a spatial quality?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I've actually struggled with in terms of recording Game Boy music, because it is so digital to almost to a fault, that it's really hard to so other friends and people, other artists that I've gone and seen perform, I always enjoyed the music more in that live context in a venue with speakers. And it's almost because you end up putting some physical space in between your ears and the like raw digital sound of the Game Boy. Whereas if I just record it straight and then you put it in your headphones, there's almost this disconnect where it's too inhuman. And so, yeah, I definitely started trying to incorporate, when I'm performing live on a PA system, it's kind of fine. Like I am kind of happy with that because I know that the sound's moving through air and then it's reaching people. But so, for example, for this performance, I was making sure that I was using a lot of reverb and a lot of delay, which gives it this additional sense of space. Which without that, it just sounds really cold and raw. And I think the same can apply for any digital thing. I think in that you need to remember how it's being experienced, and that there's a person experiencing it at the other end. And yeah, I try and, I guess, add those human or almost, the sense of randomness, I guess, that comes from space is something that I try and add in there as much as possible.
It's interesting how you already quantify the spatial quality of your sound through the depth you were mentioning.
Yeah.
Does that translate into your technique? Do you think through your technique, or do you think of the kind of the final, let's say, the cohesion of it all, or do you think more in fragments?
It's an interesting question, and it's sometimes a tricky one. So when I was studying sound composition and things like that, I think I've kept that mindset. And effectively what that mindset was kind of finding a sound and then making it's trying to remember the way that it was described to me, because now when it happens, it's just something that is happening in part of the process of creation. But effectively it's taking the sound and then listening for what I realize this sounds very, very conceptual, but listening for what the sound wants to do. And that's really kind of the way that I work with all my compositions. So if I hear a sound, like I create a sound that does one particular thing, has some particular movement, I want to just think of, okay, what's that sound? What does that sound like it wants to do next? And
so it's kind of a form of building on top of one another, in a sense.
Exactly, yeah. And I definitely always start with some kind of something that I find sonically interesting. So instead of classical composition where I would start with a scale or a particular melody, I'm normally always working off of, here's a particular sound that I really like, so let's build everything around that sound, build movement to come up to that sound, let that sound have its moment, and then where does that sound want to go from there? So to answer your question in terms of whether I think of space in that, I definitely do, but it's probably not as conscious as thinking of a physical space. It's almost more what does this sound want? And sometimes that sound would want to have a lot of space or something like that. But yeah, I don't think I necessarily aim for, I want this song to be very spacious or very tight or that type of thing. Yeah.
Interesting. We've got the questions here from the audience about techniques, I guess. How do you sample sound from Gameboy, and what is the workflow for producing a track?
Yeah, so it takes a bit to wrap your head around what the process actually is, but the simplest way to describe it is effectively what I'm running on the Game Boy is a cartridge called Little Sound DJ, and that's custom software that was made by a guy in Sweden, so it's not official Nintendo licensed software, and it was made in about the year 2000 roughly, and effectively what that does is allows you to run the Game Boy like its own sampler and sequencer and everything like that. So all the drum samples and things you heard are taken from the computer, put on the Game Boy cartridge, and then played back from the Game Boy. So it's not sampling the Game Boy, it's actually using the Game Boy as the sound source and composition medium. So it's the only thing that's creating the sound, and it's also where the music was programmed, basically. If anyone's familiar with old music sequences called trackers, basically it's a tracker, which you input notes top down. And yeah, then there's a hell of a lot of tricks and time to make basically what is 4 channels and a Game Boy sound chip to sound like something bigger, like an EDM dance track or something like that. Yeah.
So since like these chip tunes and these sounds are becoming like, I guess, a new form of audio that, you know, in the past, let's say 50 or 60 years, wasn't, you know, invented or found yet. I'm curious in the next 60, you know, years, when people look back on our time right now, and you know what craziness that we've been making, what would you think or what would you perceive could happen?
There's actually an incredible book that is like I live by almost, which is by an author called Adam Harper, and it's basically all about imagining the next century in sound and music making, and it's basically a futurist manifesto for sound. And yeah, I can go on about it a fair bit, but essentially one of the things that he talks about is the fact that the way that we've started to consume audio as a medium is so different from what it used to be, that in terms of when you as an artist release something, you've got to realize that like in the past, maybe you'd release a vinyl record and you knew someone would buy that vinyl record and play it at home, or they'd hear it on the radio. Now you have to realize that people are probably going to play it through their phone speaker while they're in the shower, or they're going to, you know, play it off a laptop, or and every time it's going to be a completely different context that music's delivered in. So I think the thing that's going to happen more and more is people really trying to take control of that. So take control of the way that it is consumed, meaning that the experience, that all these things, like everything around the music is actually part of the music. So the visuals, the platform that it's presented on, the name of the track or the name of the artist, all of those things are built into the music. And I think we've started seeing it, but I think you're going to see more and more artists really thinking about that, and even maybe trying to control it a little bit more, so that maybe that particular thing is only presented in one way and people can't just listen to it on their phone or something like that.
I see this sort of really interesting parallel world between sort of VR headsets as well.
Yeah.
So it's like audio has been transported into a packaged like information bit that's shared, and it's only as good as your audio device, right?
Yeah.
Which is similar to what digital worlds are now, right? So digital worlds are only good experienced in VR if you have an amazing like virtual headset. Like if you have a shitty headset, then it's really, really bad, right?
Yeah.
So I see like there's a bit of parallel worlds that when I think of in the future where VR is going or AR is going, I see that as like audio sort of paving the way. That I feel that might be a correlation that could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Definitely. No. I definitely see the parallels, and I think a thing that is great about things like VR is audio is very prominent in that space as well, because you have it's basically understood that an immersive experience isn't complete without the audio component. Like you can't just simply putting on the headset and looking around at something is only one step towards it. Anyone that's done it without good audio knows that you're still just experiencing the real world around you if you don't have proper good cancelling headphones that are playing other noises to mask the real world. So yeah, and just simply the fact that audio is so much to do with how we experience the world. Like you can kind of look away from something that you don't like, but with sound, it's like if there's an annoying sound, it really gets to people. Like you can really feel like you can really play with emotion a lot more with sound.
I'm sure when you first started doing this, there were probably a lot of people that were like, "What is this sound?" Right? And as we've progressed, as you know, as I guess millennials and stuff have started getting more into it, I think there's this like sort of underground movement of the sound that's becoming more mainstream. And you know, I also would, you know, if I had parents that would listen to the sound, they'd be like, turn that racket off. It's basically just static, you know, coming from sort of electronics. But there is this sort of underlying, I guess, humanistic approach to how you're creating things as well. And just the way that you're talking about, you know, how you listen to the music and also asking what it wants is quite interesting. And that sort of leads me into a question of like, is there a certain narrative that you look for inside your music? Like when you start a set and you end it, there's clearly a beginning and an end, right? And there's like peaks and troughs. And, you know, when we're listening to your music, there was clearly like moments of silence, right? That you deliberately put in there. Like, and for me, my heart stopped because I thought the audio had stopped again. But in a way, I think this sort of anticipation and this journey and this narrative, like, is it more like jazz that you're improvising, or is it like a set thing that, you know, you're just trying to tell a story?
Yeah, it is definitely a a push and pull between both. Like, I mean, at a very simple level, as someone that's done DJing as well, a very, very standard technique is to start slower and faster. And it's really easy, but it's just, it works. It saves. Another kind of part of that I added in this particular performance that is something that's very new to what I've been doing is the visual component. And in that, it was a similar concept in that I started with less happening. And then as it moved along, I added more things. It kind of like keeping a trick up your sleeve so that at the right moment, you can reveal the trick and be like, hey, it also does this thing. And I think that applies across the music as well, that a lot of and I guess when I'm compiling a set, it's different to individual tracks. So yeah, in a set, it is more what would be a good introduction, what would be something that would ease people into it. And then that's kind of, yeah, the narrative is more that journey of leading to, I guess, being frank to the things that I really enjoy. So the more chaotic and the more fast and noisy stuff, it's kind of like, realistically, the rest of it is just me trying to get to that. To kind of, and it's almost like easing people into it so that they start to understand a little bit about it, and then it's like, but forget about all that. This right here, that's and so I guess, yeah, there is that. Roughly, I think it's like the second last track or something like that is where it's like my favorite thing that I've ever made. And so the whole kind of point is like getting to that and showing that, letting it kind of, yeah, which realistically kind of is a macro version of the individual tracks, because the individual tracks are make a single sound that I really like and then let everything kind of live around that to service that sound. And so I guess, yeah, an entire set, the narrative is building everything around this moment, like to build that moment, which I think makes sense. But yeah, in terms of actual narrative, I'm not really, like, I will definitely be, I think, more potentially referencing like genres or sounds that exist because they have particular meaning built into them, like a particular drum break or a particular rhythmic pattern or something like that. I'll incorporate those elements, I guess, to give a nod to a particular thing, but in the sense of, I guess, classic narrative structure of, it telling a particular story. I've never really worked that way. I guess, yeah, it kind of comes back to that idea of servicing the sound, and effectively the sounds that I like happen to be, I guess, very dark, organic, almost. I really like liquidy type sounds, or like stuff that's drippy and things like that. So all those descriptors very possibly come out in the music, but yeah, it's not necessarily a classic narrative.
Can I ask, Alex, how do you index this sort of compositions in your work? Do you trial it many times, record it, edit it, and then repeat, or do you index it in a different way?
Yeah. It is an interesting. I think it's hard. I think I actually very often there's some things that I don't even end up recording that I'll sit with for a long time. Like there's some things that I played tonight that I only seem to play in a performance setting, but I haven't ever recorded them. And I think that it's, yeah, I think a big part of it is realistically a matter of the perfectionism and the in terms of stuff that I record and want to release to the world as a recording is very, I put a lot more effort into that. Whereas something that I'll say, create, work on, maybe tweak a bit here and there, be more than happy to play that in a performance and just see how it goes, see how I feel about it. But yeah, I'll very often just sit on those and not really
Sure.
bother releasing them. But yeah, in terms of a kind of,
Presumably the next set you were doing, some of this memory will trigger back, and you might twitch it again because it doesn't sound so good last time, and therefore this time you might change something.
Exactly, yeah. There is definitely an element of that, and there's also, I think, there's always, I think with any creative person, there's an element of once a certain thing passes a certain age limit, you want to forget all about that it ever existed. So that definitely, yeah, that definitely happens as well. And yeah, there is, I do feel like I'm probably a bit of a, once I've completed a project, I kind of, especially if I've recorded it, I like bundling it up and then not going back to it again. Like I'll potentially perform those tracks and things like that, but yeah, I think a lot of the time, especially in the digital medium, you can go back to things again and again and again and again. And part of using Gameboys and part of this whole workflow is that there's an element of imperfection and kind of embracing that. It's like, especially in even in the recording process, something goes wrong, I'll listen to it, and if it actually sounds not half bad, I'll be like, you know what? Let's just leave it. Because yeah, I think those things are sometimes what definitely in the digital world, it's very easy to overthink things, essentially.
Yeah, especially in like animation, in like VR, like we embrace the glitch, you know, all the things that comes with it. I definitely see that. I also think that there is a underlying, I guess, human set that, you know, we're all trying to pursue. Just new technologies are sort of like emerging itself. And I guess, as you said, like, you know, the same musical character that maybe Tchaikovsky would use in binary form or tertiary form, we can still use, but just using different, you know, tune sets. So it's almost like in architecture, we can still use that tool that, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright would use to make a more space really small first to really enlarge it, but we could do that in a digital space. So it's almost as though that we're trying to do these things just with different forms, techniques, and materials.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
What are you suggesting, that it's like a language? It's like a grammar?
I'm not going to go down this route, but it could. I think that there's a possibility that, you know, there will be some manifestos that will emerge in our lifetime about a new form of language within our decade, or a new form of skill set that would start to formulate. within these new experiments that, you know, our generation are playing with.
Alex, we're coming close to our time, but we have a questions here from one of the audience saying, is there any way in Melbourne I can learn more about chiptunes and Game Boy music, and maybe potentially a place for you to plug your website?
Yes, well, definitely. All these things can happen. So I'm part of, and it was actually the performance element that was streamed on Twitch was through the channel which is called Melbourne Chiptune Academy. So I run that with two other friends, and since the COVID lockdown, we normally have monthly meetups, but since the COVID lockdown, we've been doing online digital workshops / lectures. But yeah, if you search Melbourne Chiptune Academy, you'll be able to find the website for that, and yeah, tune into our events. They're quite the events are kind of made for the existing community, but if you're new, basically just join in and start plugging us with questions, and there's tons of people that are more than happy to help out, specifically in Melbourne, but also globally. There's a really friendly community that will be able to help out. And then in terms of my own stuff, Dot.Ay.com. I'm just making sure that still works. Should get you to, yeah.
It does. I'll check it out.
that will get you to my music. And yeah, from there you'll be able to find my socials and things like that as well. I released one. A lot of the tracks that I played were from an EP that I released about 1.5 years ago. But yeah, you can check out there. And there's also a short documentary as part of that on my recording process and things like that. That's definitely worth checking out.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much.
It's all right.
Well,
Yeah, no. Well, I guess this is the third lecture out of the whole 6 lecture series, and personally, I think I found it quite good to get off the screen and just listen to some music, rather than, you know, staring at the screen for the next a week, I guess. But thank you very much, Alex, for sharing your insights as well as your music. It's been a really insightful, I guess, night for us. To look at the parallels between, you know, the stuff that we're looking into, but also how your world could also start to collide with ours. And yeah, if there's anything that you would like to say to all these architecture students, feel free to. But I'm sure that they can come and check your stuff out on your website, and we'll definitely invite you to the final exhibition.
Yeah, definitely. I'm super keen to see things, and yeah, effectively, I would just really like it if anyone in any artistic field focused on sound, like even just a fraction more. I would like, because basically that's my whole thing. Yeah, whenever there's something that incorporates sound in a kind of interesting, unique, or innovative way, it's immediately captured my attention. So yeah.
fantastic. Thanks very much, Alex. Thank you for your set, and thank you very much for the really interesting conversations, and thank you more for co-hosting this with me. So tonight we learned about composition techniques in music, visual narrative, and spatial quality of sound. So we have another 3 more lectures coming up next week. Next Monday, we're going to have Space Popular joining us from the UK at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Lara and Frederick was led a unit at a visiting school about 2 years ago. After that, the next day, we're going to have Antoine presenting Pentopia. Antoine was one of our tutors from last year visiting school. He'll be returning to show some of his new work. And that's happening on the 14th of July, next Tuesday, again at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And we will then wrap up on Wednesday night on 6 o'clock again with Alvaro Fernandez giving us a Google Earth map tour of Venezuela based on his film research. And finally, next Thursday on the 16th of July at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for the launch of the virtual MSDX Winter Exhibition. That's our annual end of semester exhibitions at the Melbourne School of Design. So thank you very much, audience. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the next MSDX event. And thank you, Alex and Mon again. Thank you. Good night.